All right, everybody. Sorry, we were having some technical difficulties. I want to welcome you all to the Monday night edition of the People Show. We got a busy evening for you. We're going to be talking with Public Defender Sharon Mitchell is going to be my guest, joining us in just a few minutes. We're also going to be talking with 25th Ward Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez, who's going to be talking with us about what's going on with the City Council and balancing the budget, passage of legislation or a budget that was passed by what was called an alternate bill, and whether or not they are going to balance the budget on the backs of working class people and the poor. So Byron Sigcho-Lopez is going to be joining us later on in the program. And then we're going to be talking with a young man by the name of Kevin Jackson. Kevin Jackson served 24 years in prison for a murder that he had nothing to do with. So we're going to be talking with Kevin Jackson and his attorney a little bit later on in the program. So I want you all to tune in and make sure that you like and share the video and have your network to chime into this program. It's going to be a powerful next 2 hours of conversation that we are going to delve into. And our first conversation that we're going to be having is about the felony review bypass that the current state's attorney, Cook County State's Attorney Eileen O'Neill Burke, decided that she was going to put in place, made an executive decision without having any conversation with any members of the community, didn't talk with any of the newly elected district councils, no community outlet groups, didn't even have a conversation with the public defender's office. And this was just an executive decision decided to empower the police here in the city of Chicago with more power, with a department that already has significant trust issues. We are a city and state that has more wrongful convictions than any other state, any other municipality in the United States. We have more than 574 wrongful convictions here in Cook County and in the state of Illinois, more than any other state. The next closest state is Texas with 434. And so we're going to be talking about that and certainly pushing back on this to find out just how dangerous this is. And we're going to hear from somebody from the Public Defender's Office who's going to share their thoughts about this and whether or not we have any causes of action legally to push back on this. And so joining us right now is from the Public Defender's Office, Sharon Mitchell, who is a public defender right here in Cook County. Sharon, welcome to the program and thank you for joining us.
How you doing, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, we've been talking about this issue for some months, and we've certainly are very, very concerned about this decision that the Cook County State's Attorney has decided to further empower the Chicago Police Department, a police department that has already had a history of problematic history in terms of trust, and certainly in terms of being involved with shaky investigations that have caused for people to be convicted of crimes that they've had nothing to do with, predominantly from the African American community. And as I said at the top of the hour, we have more than 574. We lead the country with wrongful convictions here. So I'd like to ask you if you could just share your thoughts and what the Public Defender's Office thinks about this decision of empowering the police with unchecked power to charge people with felony gun charges.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Mark. I appreciate it a ton. The Public Defender's Office has been really clear about our position on this policy. We believe that the State Attorney's Office has a duty to review cases before they come into the system. And that's essentially what the felony review process is. It is a prosecutor looking to see if a case meets the standards for moving forward to move into the criminal court system. And what we've seen is first a relaxing or removal of that policy in a number, two, I think, police districts. And now we've seen the full removal of that policy when it comes to gun possession cases. That is really concerning because, again, we know that it is the responsibility of prosecutors to file these charges. It's the police officer's role to bring the charges, but it's not their role to evaluate the legal validity of those charges. And we also understand that when we're talking about these types of cases, about a third of these cases, these gun possession cases, actually ended in dismissal, right? So even with the review policy, about a third of these cases end in dismissal. And we know that these gun possession cases actually make up a massive portion of the criminal legal system. At the public defender's office, about 25% of our criminal cases, felony cases, are gun possession cases. So if you ever seen a criminal statute, a criminal book, it's a book about this thick, thousands of types of charges. 25% of those cases that we have come from that single charge, nonviolent gun possession. And this is the exact charge that we see the state's attorney's office removing their ability or moving their real duty to ensure that these cases have the proper standards to move into court.
Well, we had there was a town hall meeting when we found about that the state's attorney was doing that, because none of the district councils knew anything about this. I picked this up in January when the state's attorney office posted this in a very innocuous news outlet that came across my reel back in January. And many of the people, there were even people of her office that told us that they didn't even know that this policy had been put in place. We had a town hall meeting in the 7th district where this was piloted, in the 7th district and in the 5th district where this program was piloted. And at that time, the state's attorney sent some people from her office out. And one of the things that was glaring was that the person said that at that time, and this was back in March or April, that there had been 47 of these cases that have already been filed, and 30 of the cases had been upheld in the court, which means that 17 of them were not upheld or dismissed, which says to us that 35% of those cases should never have gone before the bench, and those people should never have been detained and charged with anything because they were not upheld. For whatever the reasons were, those people should not have been upheld, which is a glaring problem, that 35% of those cases, and as you said, 25% of those cases usually end up in a dismissal for whatever those reasons are. Are those dismissals because they should never have been brought before the court? What are the reasons that those the 25% of those cases end up in dismissal?
Well, it's actually nearly a third of the cases, a little bit more, end in dismissal, according to the Cook County data dashboard. And there could be a number of reasons. I think one of the things that we often see are violation of constitutional rights, right? And it is not like kind of this singular thing. It is a series of violations of constitutional rights that were so rampant that the previous state's attorney considered a policy to not file any charges on cases resulting in these types of unconstitutional investigatory stops that we've seen just kind of explode in the last 10 years. But you could also see cases where the individual clearly had the right to possess a firearm, and the police officer kind of at that time decided to move forward with the case. And I think that's really an important point to really think about when we're talking about who should do what in this decision matrix. Oftentimes when you talk to police, what they say is, Well, the judge will figure it out, right? If you're truly innocent, if you truly didn't do it, you go before the judge, you tell the judge, case gets dismissed, everybody's fine. And the reality of the situation is that everybody is not fine. When an individual touches the criminal legal system, whether they're arrested, held in jail, they have a case hanging over their head, there are tons of consequences, even if there is a not guilty or case dismissal 2, 3, 4 months down the line. We see people losing their jobs. We see people losing their benefits. We see people unable to take care of the things they need to take care of to keep their family safe. And quite frankly, as Americans with the Constitution, we shouldn't be having to deal with charges that should not stick. That's just not the way it should go. I think additionally, I'm an administrator, right? So I think about the public defender's office and all the attorneys that we have and how we're able to distribute those resources. I think we see a really scary trend of trying to expand the criminal legal system, right? So charge more people, arrest more people. And I think the reality of that situation is that it doesn't bring more safety. But what also happens is that people are less effective to handle the cases that they have now. So whether you're looking at it from the perspective of a prosecutor or defense attorney or a judge or a sheriff or a clerk, it's really difficult to do a good job on a case when you're just flooded with cases. So that's what we really see here, right? We see, and what we're scared about, we see a flooding of cases that will really inhibit all actors in the criminal legal system from doing the job that the taxpayers have asked them to do.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because the irony is that the way that part of the reason that they instituted this, according to the state's attorney's office, and according to what was reported from the superintendent of police, really because of a personnel problem. So, and I said, so we're going to compromise people's constitutional protections because you have a personnel problem, which is astonishing, on its face, that this is what you decide to do. So she reportedly, when she came into office, she had a conversation with Superintendent Snelling, and asked Superintendent Snelling, what is your greatest challenge? What is the greatest problem that you have? And supposedly he reported that we have our police officers that are wrapped up too much in paperwork and not on the streets, dealing with more serious crime. So this was their fix to that, was that we're going to compromise people's constitutional protections, and we're going to empower the police to be able to move these through the system so that we can have the police officers back on the streets dealing with more serious crimes, which none of that made any sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah, I think there are a couple ways to think about that. I think that we can let's accept that premise, right? That premise exists, that there is a problem with capacity, right? And that we're removing this felony bypass process, or we're creating this felony bypass because there is, we just don't have enough people. The reality is, though, is that that's short-sighted, right? Because on the front end, right, you don't have to do all the paperwork. And paperwork, I'm saying, it's the Constitution, right? It's not just some type of lax, whatever piece. We're talking about people's constitutional rights, right? For first off, but what we're going to see, or what we could potentially see, is a flood of cases coming into the system that also takes the capacity from police officers who need to come to court, from prosecutors that need to handle these cases, for defense attorneys that handle these cases, for judges to hear these cases, right? So this idea is that you're looking at this front end issue, right, and say we're going to make this decision, but you're just making it worse on yourself on the back end, right? I think the second piece is, right, if we are at a place right now where prosecutors and police should be spending more time on cases that are more serious and not these non-violent gun possession cases, well, then prosecutors police can just choose not to deal in those cases, right? They can spend their time, right, actually focusing on the cases that really, truly, truly concern the community when you're talking about, let's say, gun use or domestic violence or all hosts of crimes. This is the real problem with it. This is kind of a problem that exists throughout the criminal legal system, right? Where we talk about, okay, these are the things that we're really concerned about. These are the things that we really want to stop. But our actions don't actually reflect that. Our actions reflect chasing after crimes and chasing after offenses that actually don't have that huge impact on public safety. Now, I'm not saying that Chicago in this city, in this region, doesn't have a gun violence problem. But what I will say is that we need to be very specific about what we're talking about. We're talking about gun possession cases where people don't have the proper paperwork essentially to possess that gun. I think we also need to talk about why people have decided that they want to arm themselves, and it is the ineffectiveness of the criminal justice system, and it's people seeing and believing that they're going to be killed and they need to protect themselves. And you see this different kind of group of people coming into the criminal legal system that are not there, weren't there usually, but are there because they're trying to protect themselves. So again, I don't want to act as if gun violence is not a problem, but what I will challenge is kind of flooding the system with gun possession cases actually keeps us safer.
I think you're 100% on target there, and I agree with that, because I think that for saying that you're empowering the police in order to free the police up, this is completely contradictory to that in terms of rationale. It makes no rational sense that these are non-violent, quote, non-violent gun felony cases. So if they're non-violent and there's no victims in these cases, why are we prosecuting these cases in the first place? And why are we tying up police officers to arrest these people? What is the purpose behind that? To get guns off the street or to get illegal guns off the street? You and I both agree that we have to deal with those issues. I don't believe that, I believe that it is convenient for the state's attorney to use this and then to pilot this in Black program or Black communities predominantly as pilot programs. And we know that the people who are going to be predominantly impacted by this are young Black men. And then because of the concealed carry, we see Black men who have all the credentials that they're supposed to have and still arrested and charged in this system. So I don't see any other reasoning behind this other than to mass incarcerate more young Black men. And you found a tool or implemented a tool to do this. So my question to you is this: do we have a legal pathway? Do we have a legal pathway to push back on this decision by the Cook County State's Attorney?
Well, I think legislators in Springfield need to have a real hard conversation about what parameters need to be placed on this decision matrix. And I would think I would think that politicians could create a scheme in which we're examining this, because I do think that it's something that really needs to be looked at. I think one of the things that often gets confused again is really two things. I think the first thing is really we need to be talking about the volume of cases, right? Again, we're talking about 25% of the caseloads that we have at the public defender's office, right? So we're not, I think people don't really understand the flood of these gun possession cases, right? It is the biggest piece of the pie when it comes to felony cases. So it's basically overwhelming our system. But here's the catch, right? Even with that massive investment in this one type of charge, nobody believes that our actions have affected the supply or the demand for guns, right? So if you think gun violence is a huge issue, you think gun possession is a huge issue, you want to do something about it, the things that you're doing spends a lot of time, spends a lot of resources, challenges people's constitutional rights, but it's also not affecting the supply or demand of guns. And the reality is that we in Chicago have really seen what investments work when it comes to stopping gun violence. We've seen the success of the community violence interruption movement really stop conflicts before it happens. So listen, I have no doubt that there are people in the prosecutor's office that want to solve a real serious issue, right? I think our conversation is that whether this is the right pathway for this to be solved. And I would hope that legislators in Springfield could have that same conversation.
All right. Well, I think that you certainly have given us some great feedback on this. This is a conversation that I think that we're going to have extensively. We're going to have more of them. But I also think that in our community, we know how historically how these types of systems have worked against people in our community. And there's an old saying that it only takes you about 12 seconds to get into trouble, but it could take you almost a lifetime to get out of them. And we have, in this case, a lot of people who are getting into trouble that they didn't do. And somebody else has decided that we are setting up a system to problematically put people in these positions. As you said earlier, police officers says, well, we'll let the judge figure it out. Well, that's what we are hoping, that the professionals are supposed to figure this out before they even make the determination. No one should take you in because they're not sure that you have violated the law. If in fact that is the question of a police officer, that means that police officer should not be taking that person into custody.
Yeah, and I think one last thing before I go, I'll say this. We're not talking about ancient history, right? We're not talking about a long history of mass incarceration or things that happened in the 50s and 60s and 70s. We see the impact right now. There was a CBS News report last month that highlighted the state's attorney's office charging 2 Black gun owners with unlawful possession of a firearm, even when they were illegally allowed to. Really, and there will be more stories about this flood of cases that just shouldn't be in the system. So really, we need to be in a place where we are re-examining the felony review bypass policy. We should be thinking about how we can stop these cases from getting into the system that are inappropriate, as opposed to what we're seeing now, which is possibly opening the floodgates.
All right, Sharon Mitchell from the Cook County Public Defender's Office, thank you very much for coming on the program. We certainly appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right, take care. All right, folks, listen, this is something that why we must engage ourselves in the process. We cannot leave it to these governmental agencies, whether it be the state's attorney's office or any other office, to leave it to themselves. You and I as citizens have to engage this process. Governing is a very, very difficult thing. It's a complicated thing, but we have got to be engaged in that process so that we have real checks and balances in place of those who are implementing policies, because they impact our lives. And if you say that you're not going to get involved, you can make that determination, but you cannot make the determination not to adhere to policies that are put in place that may be antithetical to all of our lives. All right, coming up as my guest who is here with us now, we're going to be talking about the city council budget. Last week, there was this alternate budget that was passed by some alternate city council members, 29 of them. And what an irony of that. There was 29 alders that tried to inhibited Mayor Washington when he first became elected in office. And here we are again, some 37 years later, and 29 aldermen decided that they are going to inhibit this mayor from holding corporations accountable for paying their fair share. And 29 of our aldermen, including some Black aldermen, decided that corporations should not have to pay their fair share, but that any tax or revenue burden that we have, poor people people and working class people should suck it up and pay that once again. And here to join me to talk about this situation is 25th Ward Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez. Alderman Lopez, thank you very much for joining the program.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for covering this important conversation for Chicagoans.
So give us some background on what happened in the city council and why these aldermen that are supposed to be progressive aldermen and are supposed to be people who are concerned about working class and the poor decided that they were not going to hold wealthy, ultra wealthy corporations from contributing to the needs of the city.
Thank you, Mark. And I think that's a very important question for everybody across the city to know that as we were engaging in our annual debates for the budget, we go line by line, department by department to discuss. I mean, there was as is being widely known, the city even hired an accounting firm, given the significant budget deficit that we're facing, $1.2 billion. So we've done this with the support, expertise, and participation of council members in the city. Towards the end of this conversation, though, what was unusual is that we see now big corporations, lobbyists, even billionaires like Michael Sachs getting engaged in the process, especially when it came to the corporate head tax, a bare minimum that the city has been already collecting since the 1970s until 2015, when former Mayor Rahm Emanuel phased out the corporate head tax. That gap ultimately had to be financed by by property tax increases that now we're seeing mounting year after year. We see many people on the west and the south side of the city upset at how the property taxes have skyrocketed overnight. Well, the city of Chicago has been pushing to tax corporations and wealthy individuals, and apparently that has become a sensitive topic along elites, along people who unfortunately had a lot of power and influence in the past. So we saw in the last few weeks how one billionaire started maxing out in donations. Him and his wife, Michael Sachs, his wife, Carrie Sachs, and other entities. And we saw now that there was a formation, and we compare it rightly so, just as you said, Mark, in the past, a coalition that is not driven by the priorities of their constituents, is not driven by what's good for the public good, what's good for small businesses, people, small homeowners, tenants that are barely making ends meet. Inflation, unemployment, the economy being really in a terrible place. And we see one billionaire effectively making donations, hijacking the process, and effectively taking off the budget $83 million, which is nothing for big corporations like Home Depot, Google, Walmart, these corporations that make a lot of money in our city that have donated in the past, even in the years during the Daley administration. And now all of a sudden, they don't even want to pay the bare minimum. They want to make money out of a city, but have clearly no commitment to Chicagoans and residents who are barely making it. This billionaire, who used to be known in our circles as the Ram Whisperer, effectively hijacked the process and took off the $83 million and balanced it rather with fines and fees that now Chicagoans are on the hook for. Now debt collectors that are going to be unleashed on working people.
Well, not to mention that when Rahm Emanuel phased out the corporate head tax, he also phased in speed cameras, which brought in, which is another tax on the poor and working class people to the tune of about $80 million a year. So every time that the city council decide that it wants to or it needs to, it goes to the people who can least afford it. We are largely a Democratic city here, and it is hard pressed for those of us who are Democrats, those of us who are progressive, to understand how so-called progressive city council people can cower and could be as egregious to working class people and the poor as what they just did here. I guess the question is there an alternative? Is the mayor going to sign this bill or this budget into law?
Yes, I think that the city of Chicago and the mayor in particular is being now blamed for the very situation that they created. They created this mess with very short time to even have conversations, and now they want to blame the mayor for a possible shutdown. I think that it's clear that they're not acting independently when you see billionaires and wealthy corporations intervening in the budget process. The mayor, I think, is going to act with urgency to protect residents from debt collectors. I think he's going to act with expediency. Also, another shameful thing that is group, and we call it the New Verdolia clan, because this is not the individuals who are taking the vote. These are wealthy interests who are pushing for this vote. And I think now they have taken also, as you know, a bloated CPD budget with huge amounts of overtime without any transparency. There was a management ordinance that will require them to come to city council to get any approval of overtime beyond what it has already allocated in the budget. They took that out, the management ordinance, and they call themselves the fiscally responsible. They call themselves the people who are protecting the interests of the city. They're acting with independence. They're not acting with independence when we have even by name one billionaire that is carrying the waters that are carrying, who are taking cues, who are given the orders to take these votes. And that's what I call an inspector general to look at those donations, because it's illegal to influence votes in exchange of contributions. We already have a big problem with big money in politics. When it's that blunt, that open, that immoral, we gotta call attention. And I think the mayor has very little time. I don't know. I will support a veto if he decides to do so, but I'm not going to blame the mayor who proposed a different alternative from a possible shutdown. And I know that wealthy individuals like Alderman Conway, who comes from a billionaire family that has been in cahoots with other financial interests to destabilize this administration, which means destabilize the city in a time we need to be responsible and responsible stewards of our city. We see now these individuals coming, hijacking the process, impose their will, take away important measures of fiscal responsibility, including sustainable revenue. As you know, debt collectors and fines and fees are not a sustainable way of running the city. You mentioned well how they did in the past, parking deer meters, red light cameras, closing of schools, closing of mental health clinics. That is not the way to balance budgets. We need to have a sustainable, dedicated revenue, and corporations who are profitable have a responsibility. A bare minimum of $83 million sends the chilling message. But I tell you, I think Chicagoans are fighting. Working class people who are barely making ends meet, who are looking at property taxes increasing, water bills even. Imagine what it'd be, how devastating that a water bill ends up in the hands of a collector, and then all of a sudden you can lose your home. This is unconscionable. We are not going to lend ourselves to such an attempt to take away people's homes, to displace more even people. 300,000 Black residents left the city. We've seen the atrocities of previous administrations who have neglected our communities, and now they're trying to pitch us against each other. I am always grateful for the people on the south side and the west side who, in my case, elected me to office. We are building a coalition. I admire Mayor Washington for his efforts of building an incredible coalition, and we can only aspire to do something similar in a time where our city needs us to be responsible stewards and unify our city to protect us from the atrocities and attacks from Trump. We must and deserve better, and that's what I'm calling on Chicagoans to scrutinize and demand better from their council members. They're trying to blame the mayor for a possible shutdown, reductions, or cuts of services. I think the mayor is acting, and I'm hearing, unlike this other group who doesn't even want to talk anymore. They think that they have the votes. They clearly are in the pockets of one billionaire. And we have a mayor who is fighting. I think that we're going to hear some tomorrow about actions to protect people from debt, to protect us from overbloated police budgets and overtime beyond, way beyond what is actually allocated. So I think that we're going to see a city council who is trying to do what they did in the 80s. This is bigotry. This is racism and obstruction. How is conscionable that we see property tax decreases in downtown, where people in the south and the west side who are barely making meet see property tax increases and potential water bill debt collectors? That is a shame, and we're going to fight back against those atrocities.
Well, when I look at and I listed the 29 aldermen that voted in favor of this, and there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 black aldermen that basically said to the black community, to the working class, and to the poor of the black community, that they stand with the ultra wealthy and the billionaires of the city, and that they are not going to ask them to contribute more. I mean, the Bible that I says that to whom much is given, much is required. The billionaires and these corporations benefit from the labor of people, of the infrastructure that was built by the labor of working class people, that they can move their goods and services back and forth to airports and to rails to get their services in order for them to make money. We don't begrudge that. We want for their corporations to do well so that they can continue to provide good goods and services, and they can continue to provide good employment opportunities as well. But they are doing extraordinarily well. And whenever it is time for us to tighten the belt, it should not always be squeezed on the working class and on the poor. And this vote by this alternate group, that if each one of them got a check from Michael Sachs and his, political cronies, meaning that they are for purchase, that they are willing to sacrifice their constituents for a campaign donation, we need to make sure that we hold those persons accountable, and not hold them accountable just at the ballot box, but we need to hold them accountable now. Now, there are some people who are saying that, well, we can't harm business. We can't harm the businesses, and we can't overtax the businesses. Here we have the Board of Trade that does billions of trades every year, that there is no tax on those trades, and they are doing extraordinarily well. They are seeing record gains and record profits that less than 5 or 7% of the working people have anything to do with trade. So that money is going to a much bigger class or a smaller class of people, but we get no revenue from that because people like the governor, who push back against this. And I have said to the mayor, as well as to the mayor's people, that we have to galvanize the people, inform the people, and help the people to understand that everybody has to contribute, including the corporations and including those people who are enjoying the largest and not contributing to the economic health and well-being of the city that they all benefit from. They benefit from on a greater degree than working class people and the poor, and they should contribute just a little bit more. We're not asking for them, to go into the poorhouse, and whatever they're going to contribute and whatever is being asked of them, it is not going to change their lives one iota. I don't understand the rationale behind any of these orders.
Yeah, well said, Mark. I think that it is going definitely against the interests of their constituents. It is going against the interests of the city. It is unconscionable that the wealthiest corporations in the city of Chicago are unwilling to pick up a bare minimum tax. $83 million is nothing for big corporations who are making that in a week. So I think it is important that we recognize that the arguments that they're using are simply flawed, are false. They're saying that, that some of the individuals, wealthy individuals, have come to testify saying that this is a job killer. And their own research and their own backers, for instance, former Inspector General Joe Ferguson has said that there's no evidence of such thing. In fact, quite the contrary, there is a lot of evidence that the corporate head tax during the daily years were actually an stable tax that provided a sustainable source of revenue. And now that we have wealthy, even more wealthy corporations that have moved in, like Google, that are doing extremely well, Amazon, these corporations have a responsibility to chip in, to put their part. And when they are saying that they're not willing to do that, they're slapping in the face Chicagoans who are barely making ends meet, who are struggling to put food on their tables, that are looking at the property tax bills and are saying this is outrageous. How can this change overnight? And I think it is important that as the representatives, we look into our constituents' eyes and said, yes, we're doing everything we can to save every possible penny, as they claim to be. They claim to be the fiscally responsible. This group claims to be the people who are looking after the community, and they're forgetting to identify who are they taking money from. These are the interests who shut down 50 schools in the poorest areas of the city. 90% of the school closures were in Black communities. The mental health clinics, the devastation, the disinvestment in the South and the West Side, the historic disinvestment. I think that last time that we saw a mayor who cared for the community was Mayor Washington. I'm always being an admirer of that coalition because you can attest of their investment. You can attest of their commitment to the public good. And it's important that people, as you mentioned, Mark, in the city hold these older persons accountable, because in a time like this, where people are looking at their bills and they're claiming to do everything they can to protect their residents, they should never have allowed corporations off the hook, and worse, to take money from billionaires. We corrupt billionaires with a history in the city. These are billionaires who were fighting FOIA requests. When the Tribune asked for FOIAs between Rahm Emanuel and Michael Sachs, they were fighting those FOIA requests in courts. These are people who are trying to steer pension business to their side. This is the corruption that we're trying to defeat. And I'm grateful that you are providing us a space, because they're using bigotry. What they use in the city council was this anti-immigrant, the immigrants' faults. The scapegoat. This budget has nothing to do with the immigrant community. In fact, has nothing. There has no investment on that. It has totally the opposite. This is investing in mental health. This is investing in the people of the city of Chicago, and they're trying to take that away. They're trying to sabotage the very city that they're supposed to represent, and we took an oath to represent. They are sabotaging our own efforts to serve the billionaire class. The only minority destroying our cities and our country is the greedy billionaire class that simply send a message that they will not pay. But I tell you, Mark, that we as Chicagoans, we gotta come together. Our communities are under attack. They're underrepresented. They are being disinvested. They are being exploited. And it's about time that we stand up. And I think Chicagoans are waking up. And I know when the sleeping giant wakes up, these older persons, just like in the 80s, when Mayor Washington was able to flip the council, I am hopeful that history comes back to a commitment to a city that is working so hard. I feel that we have the hardest working people in the country, fighting, struggling, helping their community the most we can, and we deserve better. It is unconscionable. This was an immoral and an ethically bankrupt decision, and we gotta hold these 29, and the number is almost the same. History almost repeats identity. 29 individuals who sold out their constituents.
Yeah, it's pretty astonishing. Let me just kind of switch here a little bit. I want to ask you a question. We have had this current president that has sent a mob to our city called ICE, and it has impacted our city in so many negative ways. Now that they are back again and impacting people's lives again, what is your thoughts about what is happening with ICE?
That's a great question, Mark. And look, I think this, as you mentioned, this is Trump's personal militia, according to a federal judge, because the Commander Bobino, and a group of mercenaries. These individuals, in some cases, are poorly trained. Many have criminal records more often than the immigrants that they detain. They out of that so-called Midway Bliss operation that kidnapped 3,000 Chicagoans. 98% of them had no criminal record, no history, any criminal record. And unfortunately, our immigrant community, once again, is being used as a scapegoat. That's what I'm very grateful. Mayor Washington actually was the first mayor who stood up to this bigotry and help us have a sanctuary city status so people are respectful of the due process. Here we protect our constitutional rights and our human rights. Unfortunately, in our country, as you know, when the Epstein files are being withheld, when scandals of corruption, those individuals in the White House are actually enriching themselves. They are giving contracts. $180 billion is what ICE has received from the federal government. Imagine in an agency that appeared out of thin air in the last 15 years or so, and now has $180 billion budget. And these individuals are sent out to criminalize and to attack American citizens, American cities. We saw in South Shore. This is not only an immigrant issue. This is a distraction from the real issues, and the cahoots and the connections between corporations and the ultra-rich are very real. Look in South Shore, that we're not speaking enough about these atrocious incidents in our city. In South Shore, in one of the buildings, I believe the 7500 block of South Shore, when an entire complex, dozens of people in the middle of the night were kicked out of their apartments. Kids and families almost naked in ziplocs tied by these mercenaries with no evidence. They're yet to discover a single gun from that shameful raid. And these are black and brown residents, American citizens that were displaced, and now nobody's talking about this same developer happens to be the biggest South Shore landlord of the biggest landlord in the whole South Shore area. So these are the connections, and these are MAGA contributors. So this is the connections of the deployment of mercenaries for economic purposes, to displace, to send people out of their homes, to make sure that they don't have to do the due process. They don't respect the due process or go to court. Now they're using these mercenaries, and funny enough, that they happen to come just for a very short period of time, right as we were in budget conversations, and we were talking about corporations being taxed. We saw the same group coming back after they have left almost a month ago, on November 8th, the last shameful operation that they conducted in our city when they mazed a 1-year-old, when they shot up civilians. They ended up arresting majority of U.S. citizens because people are protecting their neighbors. And I'm grateful for people in the city who are uniting. There's no one who's united more than the wannabe dictator who's unifying our city. But the deployment of violence and terror to distract, the only person that I would say that is taking away American jobs are not the immigrants, are the incompetence and corruption of Trump. Look at the report every month, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 jobs lost every month. It's so bad that they're not even reporting those numbers now. So it's very important that as Chicagoans, we see that taxing corporations, taxing billionaires, we will protect our city from those interests. And the attack on our city is not only on the immigrant community, it's on working people. And our city has stood up together, and I'm grateful for Chicagoans for doing so.
Well, the mayor, I believe, has until, if I'm not mistaken, that he has until the 29th to decide on whether or not he's going to sign the bill or the budget, or veto the budget. Now, does the mayor have the wherewithal to do the line item veto, or will he just simply does he have to veto the bill if he's going to veto it at all?
Unfortunately, and that's the problem with this, is that the veto vetoes every aspect of the budget, would mean that potentially beginning of next year, and that's what they didn't give us any time, and the new Verdolia clan actually imposed the date that we can discuss this would be January 21st, effectively shutting down the government for several weeks, cutting services, not paying city workers, effectively withholding services, which is something that I think is a very difficult decision for the mayor to take. I think the mayor, I believe the mayor is fighting for Chicagoans. I think he presented a balanced budget, a budget that was responsible. It is a shame that one billionaire has taken upon himself, the rum whisperer, Michael Sachs, and the 29 New Verdoliaks upon themselves to protect these corporations. But I expect the mayor, and I know they've been in calls all this afternoon, looking at ways of protecting people from these debt collectors, trying to bring proposals back. I think it'll be a tough decision. I would say that the mayor has a tough decision to make. I think that if he vetoes the decision, that this budget, he'll be right to do so. And if he doesn't, I think he will do everything he can to protect Chicagoans. And I think that's something that we need to remember: who stood up for the people and who stood up for the billionaire class and corporations.
Now, the coalition that includes you that voted against this budget, are you in conversation with the mayor?
Yes, we are in conversations with the mayor. The mayor has made himself available through all this period. I think that some of these same aldermen, to be honest, didn't even come to, even though the management ordinance requires to come and talk at least a few months earlier, some of these aldermen didn't even attend the budget meetings with departments. They don't even know what is in the budget. I tell you, it's so embarrassing. Some of those guys didn't even read the E&Y report, the accounting report that they use to criticize things on the budget. Mayor, when they talk about cuts and efficiencies, they're talking about layoffs. And it's clear that they don't want to tell people openly. They're talking about cutting services. Some of those proposals requesting cutting hours for the 311 calls. So I think that some of the proposals that they put at the table, the mayor, I can attest, the mayor made himself available, but there's some decisions that were unnecessary when you have corporations that are wealthy and can pay.
Well, we at some point, and I think we have to find a way to do this, that when, and of course, they have been gaslighting the immigrant and the migrant situation against the mayor. And so, of course, they're trying to use that to gaslight this situation here. But I think that the people of Chicago are a lot smarter than these billionaires that are trying to use it. I happen to think that this is a tactic that they're trying to use to try to move. This is a Republican move that they're trying to do their very best to infiltrate Chicago and infiltrate the government. I am a Democrat, and I tell people that all the time. I'm a Democrat. That if we don't like something, then some parts of the Democratic Party and some parts of the Democratic infrastructure is not good. But you don't blow up the entire system. If you have a car and your car is not running well because of some broken parts or some parts that are worn out, you take your car to the shop and you put in and replace those parts that are not good. We have to do the same thing with the Democratic Party. Those parts that are not working well, we have to extract them and put in the better parts in order to make the entirety work better for our system. This ideology, or this idea of what people like Michael Sachs and Ken Griffin and all those other people and Willie Wilson and all these people who are hiding behind so-called independents, which are nothing more than MAGA Republicans and to try and infiltrate what's happening here in Chicago. Now, we have things that we have to work and we need to make better. But I think it is important upon us that those people who are not working in the interest of working class people and to the people and to poor people and to the people of the city of Chicago, we've got to deal with replacing those people with people who are going to work in the best interest of the masses and not in the best interest of a preferential few.
Absolutely. You couldn't have said it better, Mark. I think that these are the elements, in fact, when Michael Sachs was confronted about as to why he donated, why he went to steer the budget in this direction, he simply used the fact that he's a Democratic donor. And that's just not acceptable. We need to scrutinize and make sure that these elements of division, these elements of billionaire agendas don't come and fracture and lead and lead within the party. I agree wholeheartedly about that. And the other thing is like this, as you mentioned, these MAGA tactics are very real. These are not conspiracies. I mean, I'm telling you, these MAGA reactionaries come every single council member to try to steer the narrative about the immigrant community against the black community. Is the divide and conquer. We know this game so well. Is the divide and conquer the oldest tactic in town? And I think in that sense, we gotta unite our community. I think this is an opportunity to pivot, to hold accountable those elected officials who are taking dirty money, who are looking the other way, who are standing for the billionaire class and against their constituents, and to demystify, look, it was shameful to see these MAGA narratives to spread out, to talk about the immigrant issue as the problem in the budget. And then at the same time, we see Greg Bobino, that mercenary commander, with his goons coming to the city of Chicago for those same 4 days of the budget. He came Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and they left. Just like Ken Griffin came, defeated, spent $52 million to defeat the progressive income tax, and then left to live in Florida. We are here, our families are here, as a father who sent kids to CPS, someone who's grateful for the city of Chicago. As I said, I'm an immigrant. I didn't come here, when I wasn't born here, but I came as quickly as I could, because Chicago is a city that fights, is a city of working people, and I'm always grateful. And I know Chicagoans know better. And I know that we will hold them accountable. And that's the beauty of our city. And that history of resiliency, going back to the years of Mayor Washington, is something that we must hold dear to our hearts and be proud to resemble and look at that history. There's beautiful history, as we have issues with Rahm Emanuel and how they cover up the Lavacoa McDonald, shutting down on the mental health clinics and schools. But we also have a history rich on identity of our community, proud of where we are, and that rainbow coalition that I hope comes back to defeat the billionaire bigotry agenda.
All right, Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez, thank you so much for coming in. We have to stay on top of this. I want to speak to some of the other alders who are standing with the people of Chicago. I'm going to try to reach out to them. Going to ask you to come back at some point in time so that we can continue this conversation along with some of the other aldermen. Thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Have a good night.
Okay. All right. Good night. All right, folks. We're going to be talking with Kevin Jackson, who's going to be coming up a little bit later on in the program in just a few minutes. We're going to be talking with him and his attorney. But look, I want for us to understand that Cliff Kelly, who is a former alderman of the city of Chicago and a retired host at WVON, used to always say something that you get the government that you deserve, meaning that this is on us. This is really on us that we're allowing for these people, Pat Dow, alderman of the 3rd Ward, Desmond Yancey, alderman of the 5th Ward, black alderman, Gregory Mitchell, alderman of the 7th Ward, Michelle Harris, alderman of the 8th Ward, Anthony Bill, alderman of the 9th Ward, Derek Curtis, alderman of the 18th Ward, Ronnie Mosley, alderman of the 21st Ward, Monique Scott, alderman of the 24th Ward, Emma Mitz, alderman of the 37th Ward. These are all Stephanie Coleman, who did not vote, but as far as I'm concerned, if you were not there, then you were voting with that alder group. She was not there, didn't record a vote. These are aldermen that actually voted against the interest of the black community. And it is incumbent upon us to ensure that we organize ourselves, that we do not allow for this type of actions to continue. To ask people who are the ultra wealthy that are benefiting from the infrastructure of this city, making record profits more than they were 20 years ago, to contribute a little bit more, just like you're asking for working class people and poor people. You're not even asking, you're actually mandating that working class people and poor people become responsible for subsidizing the budget and not asking anything of wealthy people who can afford and should contribute a little bit more, because it's not going to change their lifestyle at all for them to contribute to making up the deficit that exists in the budget. This is why it is important that we must organize ourselves together, and we have got to get rid of these idiosyncratic personality splits and differences so that we can look at the greater whole to deal with and to empower the voice of the people that can put the demands on our representatives to say that you are not going to cower always to somebody who writes a check. When we put ourselves in the position, then we can neutralize a Michael Sack or Ken Griffin, that can neutralize them of writing checks, because they can write checks. But those are 2 votes, actually 1 vote. We are thousands of votes. If we put ourselves and organize ourselves and maximize our strength, which is our collectiveness, that we have not done. And we have to really seriously think about that. We have to seriously think about that. We have to get rid of this ideology that if it doesn't go all the way my way, then I'm not going to be involved. I'm going to hit the highway. We've got to abandon that attitude. We've got to abandon that attitude. And if we demonstrate to ourselves by organizing ourselves in a fashion that we have not done, I guarantee you, I promise you, all of us will have a better outlook and certainly a better position in terms of what it is that we actually have the power to do. We have got to do it if we are going to change the complexities of what we see happening now. It is up to us. If we don't do it, they are going to continue in that pathway. All right, we're going to move forward. I want to talk to you about a significant story I told you all about. We shared this in our last meeting, 10 by 10 to Win meeting on last Thursday, and we are going to hear from them. We're going to also invite them to come to our meeting. I want to ask for you all to reach out to your networks and tell them to tune in to this conversation, because it is going to be one that was some triumph. There's still work being done, and but there was also some tragedy. Here was a young man, 19 years of age, back in 2001, was arrested, charged, and convicted, and served 23 years, 8 months in prison, only to be exonerated of that murder. And you now have a Cook County State's Attorney that is being obstructive in this young man getting a part or being restored the justice that was ripped apart from him. Joining me for the program is a young man by the name of Kevin Jackson and his attorney, Elizabeth Bacon. They are going to share their story with us. I want for you all to tune into this because we're going to be working with them. But this is a gripping story, another tragedy of a story here in the city of Chicago, where we have the dubious record of being the place that has the most number of wrongful convictions of any other municipality in the country, 574 and counting. The next state that has the closest number is Texas with 434. And so here joining me now is attorney Elizabeth Bacon, who is the attorney for Kevin Jackson, and Kevin Jackson himself, who is a young man that served 24 years for a crime that he had nothing to do with. Welcome to the program, Kevin Jackson, and welcome to the program, attorney Elizabeth Bacon. Thank you both for being here to share your story with us.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to come to you. Thank you very much. Kevin, I didn't speak with you earlier, but you and I spoke last week, and we talked about some things that people don't know about, and you can share as much as you would like to share about your story. And I want to just give you the floor, but let me just go to you, Elizabeth, and you can kind of set the stage, and then we will give Kevin the floor to share whatever he would like to share with the audience about his journey and his experience.
Sure. I mean, Kevin Jackson sits here as an extraordinary man with an extraordinary story, but unfortunately one which is all too common in the Chicago environment. And that is that as a very young man, as a teenager, as you mentioned, he was convicted of a brutal murder that he had nothing to do with. He wasn't even present or near the scene at the time, and convicted solely on the basis of fabricated evidence of false witness statements, which were coerced and fabricated by the city of Chicago police officers and detectives, and all of which were actually recanted at trial. But nonetheless, because of the strength of prosecutors' impeachments of young African and Black American witnesses, they still convinced a nearly all-white jury to convict him of a crime that there was no physical evidence of his involvement in this crime. There were no testimonies other than those that were coerced and recanted at trial. And yet he sat there and watched himself be convicted of this crime. He is a survivor. He is a survivor of 23 years and 4 months of brutal imprisonment, and of all the indignities and painful injuries and illnesses and everything, emotional distress that comes with that. And now, having been fully exonerated by the Illinois courts, and we can talk about that later, he stands here attempting to get a certificate of innocence to which he is richly entitled. And yet we still have a state's attorney's office who is opposing that certificate of innocence on the basis of simply, you never know, maybe he was actually involved. And they have hired very expensive suburban counsel outside of Cook County to fight us in this process. They will not win. They are delaying the inevitable. But nonetheless, this is another, indignity and another fight that Mr. Jackson has had to engage in and endure and have the perseverance to get through. And it affects his ability to rent an apartment and get a car loan and do all these other things that all of us as adults take for granted. So with that, I will present to you my client and my hero, Kevin Jackson.
Kevin Jackson, welcome to the program, and thank you very much for being here. Please, whatever you would like to share, just give us your story in any way that you would like to share that to us. I mean, we're all sitting on the edge of our seats. We can't hear you. I think you have to unmute or turn your volume up. Your microphone is muted. Okay, I think you unmuted it. We still can't hear you. Okay, work on your microphone. We're going to come back to you when you get it. We're gonna allow you to come in. Check your volume of your microphone and make sure it's turned up. Oops. Okay, they'll come back in. Let me ask you while they get that together, attorney. There was no physical evidence that they had to show that he was anywhere near or had any involvement there. They had some false witnesses that recanted their testimony of saying that they saw him or on the scene.
Mm-hmm.
What was it that they convinced a jury to convict Kevin of this crime when they had nothing else other than these witnesses that had some made up stories?
Well, it's what we call in legal terms impeachment evidence. So if you sign a statement in in an official setting, a police department setting, you are signed as a witness, you are signing that statement under oath. And therefore, if you later try to recant, as we call it, or say that that actually wasn't true, prosecutors have a very simple mechanism in front of a jury to say, well, Ms. or Mr. Witness, you signed this statement under oath. You're under oath today. When you signed this statement under oath, you swore that Kevin Jackson was the person who committed this crime. And now here today, you're telling us Mr. Jackson wasn't the person who committed this crime. So you're a liar. And which set of these statements is actually correct? Now, it should never come to that, right? Because this kind of evidence should never be coerced. These people should not be held against their will as witnesses. They should not have other convictions or potential warrants or whatever, or the custody of their children held over their heads to force them to sign a statement that is untrue and incorrect and written by the police. But nevertheless, that's what happens. And so once that statement is signed, prosecutors then have a very potent weapon in front of a jury to say, how can we believe you? Because you said one thing one time and now you're saying something entirely different. And then to contrast with that, they say, look at these officers who put their lives on the line every day for us, and look what they have to put up with, that these folks in the community don't appreciate what they do. And, it was an argument that in 2003 obviously was successful. I would like to think that it's an argument in 2025 or 2026 would not be acceptable. I can't guarantee that, though.
All right. Well, we're going to continue with that to ask those legal questions, because that's very, and I think it's important for the public to know that we have a process, a legal process, which went forth with clerks, a judge, a jury, a defense, and prosecutors within a system that failed once again, another human life, and robbed and raped a person of their constitutional protections, of their freedom, of justice completely. And here it is that they still have to fight, even though a court, an appeals court, looked at this and decided that this should never have happened.
Correct.
And an appeals court, which is a part of that process, that we have available to us, and he has available to him under his constitutional protections, they looked at the body of this case, the body of this so-called evidence, and decided that there was a failure in the justice system, and I can give some other adjectives, but he now still has to fight a system that the appeals court has said that you got it wrong. You got it wrong. Make it
And
right.
Mark, just to support your point further, Mark, not just a failure, multiple serial failures over time, involved in the initial investigation of this crime, for which this family, the victim's family, has had no justice, and to this very evening has no justice. But through the investigation process, through the interrogation process, through the conviction process, all the way through, multiple challenges to this conviction, failure after failure after failure.
Got these headphones.
Mhm. All right, I think we got you, Kevin. I think we got you. I think your microphone is on. We're just waiting for you to get back.
Uh-oh.
We lost you. We lost you again,
How did that happen?
Kevin. We lost you again. We had you before. Unmute your microphone.
You can hear me now?
There you go. We got you now.
Yeah. God. This technology stuff, man. Like, I gotta keep pace with it, and now all right. Sorry about that, Mark. I'm so sorry, man. For real.
You're okay. You're okay. You're all right. All right. Okay. All right. The floor is yours, Kevin. Give us your timeline of this experience and your journey. You and I had some long conversation about this. And you also talked about some things that, we hear about the wrongfulness of the conviction, and that you had to spend so much time and all that. But, we don't know a lot of the other details. And if you'd like to share those with us so that we could really understand, or at least have a better understanding. I won't say that we will be able to fully understand it because we didn't live it. You lived it. And to help us to understand what that experience was, so that we could have a glimpse of understanding how you were able to endure through that for all that time.
First of all, I want to thank you for having me, Mark. Man, it's a pleasure and an honor to be on this show. And I also want to thank the supporters, man, that's been supporting me through this. My lawyers, the organizations, and God, man. Without this, like, I'm almost for certain that I wouldn't survive this without God. And my prayer is to continue, hopefully, to have him continue to keep this hedge around me. I mean, as a 19-year-old kid going into a police station for something that you didn't do, is like a nightmare. I mean, a real nightmare. And being told to take a look at 55th Street because this will be the last time I'll ever see it. And you believe that at some point, because they done hauled you off the street, threw you in a car, took you down to 51st and Wentworth, forced people to sign statements on you. Like, it's crazy to be able to have somebody able to just do that. And going off into this court process, I was naive to really think that I would have my day in court. But after continuance after continuance after continuance, and a jury verdict of guilty in the trial, I was devastated. I felt like my life left my body. And I remember Judge Clay telling my sister to get out the courtroom because she was crying so hard. when I was sentenced to 45 years. She was crying so hard. And I ain't know what to tell her because I'm so used to, I raised her. And to see her brother go off for a crime that he didn't commit, I know how she felt. And I tried to calm her down so it wouldn't be no more trouble inside the courtroom. And I remember that day vividly. I remember going back to my cell, just wondering how I was given 45 years for something I didn't do. And thinking like, is this America? Like, how could this have happened? So they send a 23-year-old kid, still a kid, basically, down to IDOC, where I would say that was like one of the most traumatic experiences I think I ever experienced in my life, going down to Stateville Correctional Center. And all I honed in on was Kevin B. Strong. And pride yourself in humility, dignity, and honor, and spiritually. And that's what got me through these 23 years. Countless nights, countless sleepless nights from what I was experiencing in as far as the medical conditions, just the actual conditions, the prison conditions. I mean, I went through a whole year and 3 months? What's that, Elizabeth, with a stomach infection?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Painful, sleepless nights. Me and Elizabeth just had a conversation to where I told her, how I thought I was gonna die. I was writing letters to people like I was about to die.
Well, and in fairness, it was an infection that could lead to cancer and frequently does. That was not being treated.
Yes. So with a fractured hand.
Yes.
That wasn't being treated. Badly fractured hand. And I had to go to court to get treatment. So overall, Mark, just the experience, man, the constant denials of my appeals, the manipulation of evidence that they was doing to me, like mentally, I just thank God he gave me that strength to prevail. Because that sticks in my head, Mark, to where when Brian Forberg told me, man, hey, Googie, take a good look at 55th. This will be the last time you see it. Like and to be here today on this show, Mark, I am so grateful. So grateful. Just so grateful to be free because the system was designed to have me not ever get out again. Mm-hmm. That's how the system was designed. That's right. So for him to say that to me and for me to be here is like so big to me. Real big. Because I know I'm supposed to be sitting here. Excuse me.
It's really kind of hard to put this into to words, but it's important that the public and that we've seen these situations, but it is important that the public not adjust to abnormalities as normal. not for us to adjust to this as though this is something that, okay, this is just another incident. It is another, but we have to be just as outraged about it. We have to be just as outraged about it. And I don't want for us to ever adjust to this as as a normality. This is an abnormality that should never happen. The judge in this case, that judge, attorney, that judge could have said, wait a minute, there is something wrong here, which is what the judge's responsibility is. That's why they're called a judge, to make a judgment that there is something wrong here. Listening to testimony, listening to whatever the evidence was, which was not much of anything. Why wouldn't that judge step in and say, this is wrong, and I'm making a determination that this is not a case that should have been brought? Why couldn't the judge have done that?
It's a really interesting question, Mark, and I think the same question applies to the prosecutors who swear an oath to do justice. First and foremost, doing justice does not mean bringing false convictions or charging at any cost under any circumstances. So why did those judgments fail? Why did this judge, sit there and listen to 4 witnesses who had consistent stories about being coerced into? 2 of the witnesses said they weren't even there at the time that the murder occurred, so they would have no idea who committed this murder. And the other 2, but all of them said they were coerced. I don't know. Is it a function of getting accustomed to hearing people testify in this manner, and just at some point the judiciary, like the state's attorneys, become numb to this? Is it a function of being overworked and undercompensated and just giving up on doing justice at some point? I can't really explain it. And I think in Kevin's case, it becomes even more.
I think that's I think that, I don't buy the idea of them being overworked or any of that in those positions. I don't buy it at all. And I'm sure you don't, but certainly I'm not giving them that. Who was the state's attorney at the time? Was that Anita Alvarez? Was she the state's attorney at the time?
Yes, I believe so. Isn't that right, Kevin? Or was it? I'm sorry.
It was. I think it was Richard. I think it was Richard Divine.
Yeah, it was
Divine. Then Anita Alvarez came in.
She came in.
Okay, so Richard Divine was there. So these witnesses, or so-called witnesses that they got, because I don't want to call them witnesses, these people that they pulled in, where did they get them from?
Well, 2 of them were on site at the time of the murder. The murder happened in a gas station, and 2 of them, there were several people that were present at the gas station at the time that the murder occurred, either getting gas or going to the convenience store that was located on site. And so after the murder occurred, the police showed up and started interviewing those people who were, on site. That investigation expanded thereafter to other sort of usual suspects, if you will. But that's how they initially generated the list of witnesses that they interviewed. They honed in on the fact that some of these witnesses were vulnerable because they had outstanding warrants, or because they had, young children that they could use to manipulate them to sign these statements. And I will say, Mark, that I think that most people, not everybody, but most people, are good people in the sense that they want to, not indict someone who didn't participate in a crime. But at a certain point, after you've been held in the police station as a witness, not as a suspect, but as a witness for so many hours, and then which hours turn into days, and you're threatened with being charged with the crime yourself, you're threatened with having, your home investigated as to the status of your children while you're away, et cetera, et cetera. Even the best people can give up at a certain point and say, I have to get out of here. And, they're a statement is slipped in front of them, and they're told, if you just sign this, it'll be, you can leave. And so they do. In Kevin's case, certain of his family members who were present at the time were threatened with being charged with the crime and told as a lie that Kevin had signed a statement identifying them as the shooter. That was not true. So it's, I think there's a lot of, I think these detectives use a lot of psychology against very vulnerable people. In this case, almost all young people, who just at a certain point, give in and think maybe they can fix it later, which is, to a person, each of these witnesses thought they could fix it later. And, 23 years and 4 months later, we finally got the situation rectified. But Kevin, I would look to you also.
And how old were these? Yeah, and listen, I understand a little bit about the tactics that police use in investigation. I was robbed in 2014 by the same group of young men that ended up killing a 16-year-old the next morning. And when they brought me in the police station, I was only able to identify one person who was standing in front of them. There were 4 people, and there was only one person that I was able to clearly identify. Mm-hmm. But they were applying pressure because they knew who the 4 was. I could not say who the other 3 was because I could not clearly identify them. And I was not going to say that somebody was a person that I could not identify. But right. They were clearly trying to pressure me to, point out the other 3 people. And I said to them, look, I don't care how many times you tell me this. I cannot tell you that these were the other people that were there. They were off to the side. It was dark. I couldn't identify them. And I'm not going to guess to put somebody else in a position that I am not certain that those were the people there. I cannot tell you that these were those people. I can only identify the person that I was able to identify. I cannot identify those other people. So I'm a little aware of how those tactics that they use. Help us to understand, how did they identify you, Kevin? How did they get them to identify you as the person that they wanted to pin this on?
Honestly, I can't even answer that. Like, I don't know. You know what I mean? To be in the police station, knowing you wasn't there, and having somebody say you did something, it's devastating. And that
you weren't even there, right? You weren't even anywhere near there.
No, I wasn't nowhere near there. I was at home.
So, right. So help me understand, attorney, how is it that the police can get some individuals to come in and say, this is the person that we want you to say that was there. This is the person that we want you to identify that was there and committed this act. How is it that the police officer, that sounds criminal to me.
Well, what's ironic, Mark, is that, if you're home in bed where you're supposed to be, asleep with your family, various of your family at home with you, that's one of the worst alibis you can possibly have. Because a jury or prosecutors will say, well, of course they said he was home asleep, right? It doesn't make sense, because really that should be everybody's best place to be, and everybody's best, reason why they weren't at the scene of a murder. In this situation, a car that Kevin shared with his cousin was present at the scene. Now, the fact that your vehicle that you share with other people who use it independently of you at various times, all the time, was present at the scene, does not mean you committed a murder. It doesn't mean anybody associated with the car committed a murder. It was a gas station, for goodness sake. So there were cars there, right? But because they were able to trace this car, somebody said they thought at some point they saw the person who was the shooter in the car, which actually was not true. But some witness somewhere along the line thought that that was the case. They decided when they saw this car and they saw Kevin was driving the car, that became then the link to pin this on Kevin. Also, they pick vulnerable people, and it happened that Kevin was on probation for another thing that had zero to do with this, not important in the scheme of things at all. But these folks are vulnerable. And so I believe that the Chicago Police Department has a policy and a practice of exploiting those people, the list of quote unquote usual suspects, if you will. And I don't mean that Kevin was a murder suspect, but I'm just saying he was, he grew up in the neighborhood. He knew all these folks. And he was vulnerable to this kind of framing and this kind of fabrication.
Well, that would be most of us. That if that's the rule, or if that's the the rationale that they use, that could be any of us. That could be that could be any of us, right?
Yeah, all of us who are at home where we're supposed to be with our families. It turns out that's a pretty lousy alibi, right? Because of course your family's your wife or your husband, your aunt, your uncle, whatever, are going to say you were there.
I don't know when it was that we started using DNA. I think it was pretty close to around that time. Was DNA evidence in effect during that time?
No, and the other DNA evidence was starting to be implicated at that time. But the situation in this, when as part of the reinvestigation of Kevin's case, the state's attorney herself hired new forensic experts to come in and look at the job of the crime scene investigation that was done in this case. They hired 2 experts, and it was pathetically bad. It was not up to the state of the art, even at that time. And part of the problem with that then is that the evidence was lost. So evidence that might have been exculpatory was never collected. Evidence that might have pointed to another person was never collected. The crime scene was not properly preserved. And so we didn't have the benefit of anything like that to even tap into. Because Kevin wasn't there, none of his DNA would be on the scene either. So we would have had to, try to tie through DNA evidence, somebody else in particular, which could have been challenging, but it would have been nice to have the opportunity to utilize that evidence. But we simply didn't have it because it was never collected, because the Chicago Police Department did such a poor job in their investigatory practices in this case.
So the only connection that they had was the fact that Kevin shared a car with somebody else, and that car happened to be at the gas station. And therefore, Kevin was at the gas station, and Kevin was the person who committed this act. That was their evidence?
I'll let Kevin respond to that. But
I mean, Justice Mikva spoke about that, about the car, and how the state's attorneys was saying like the shooter was in my car. They one of the victims said the shooter was in my car, and the state's attorney, Justice Mikva, halted that instantly. Yeah, she halted that instantly. So, that was the only connection that they had. because me and my cousin shared a car. And when Forberg now stopped me, I was the driver of the car.
On a different day.
On a different day, yeah. Actually, a couple weeks later. Yeah.
Kevin found himself with a gun in his face and Chicago police detectives screaming obscenities at him.
Yeah. Don't you fucking move, Googie. Don't you fucking move. I was looking down the barrel of his gun the day I was arrested.
But see, the point is that at some juncture, the Chicago Police Department decided that it was better to get somebody. That it wasn't imperative to get the person who actually committed the murder. It was imperative to get somebody. This case needed to be closed. And as you and I have discussed, my view on this is that it just is indicative of the contempt that these officers feel for this community, that they felt for in this case, the victim's family who lost a husband, a brother, a son, an uncle, and the contempt that they obviously felt for Kevin, which he was just simply a player, a cog in a wheel, somebody to put the conviction on so that the case could be closed. And then once it happens, once you're convicted, the system is designed to sustain that conviction. The system is not designed to question that conviction. And that becomes more and more ingrained the farther up the appeals process you go. And so the likelihood of getting, every court that weighs in on this, first it's the jury, then it's the first level of appellate court, the next level. The next court says, well, the jury found him guilty. The trial court let the jury verdict stand. The appellate court sustained the conviction. The Supreme Court sustained. So it builds on itself, I guess is what I'm saying. And so It becomes less and less likely that appeals are going to be, are going to be successful or be closely scrutinized the way they should be. And the fact that Kevin was able to maintain any kind of perseverance through this process of continual denials, continual deafness to his innocence is simply remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, just to see how the detectives is now, like Brian Forberg, he's a sergeant, you know what I mean? Detective Foster, he's the Area 5 commander. Like it's like they are being rewarded for putting people behind bars falsely. And it's still 23 guys still wrongfully incarcerated that's in prison right now at the hands of John Foster and Brian Forberg, which both of their wives were state's attorneys in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. So, I mean, it's tough.
It's an important point to reinforce, Mark, that you made earlier, which is that we shouldn't become accustomed to this. And in particular, and yes, we hear about exonerations regularly in Chicago because we are the wrongful conviction capital of the world, of the country. But even more poignant in this, or more important in this situation, is that this same team of detectives framed and garnered the convictions of, as Kevin says, more than 20 other young men of color. And remember that those convictions were for first-degree murder, which are the toughest convictions to overturn, probably for good reason, right? I mean, we don't want a murder conviction to be easily set aside, but we certainly don't want false murder convictions to be sustained, on the basis of fabricated testimony. So in this case, once those young men were convicted of first-degree murder, it's a Sisyphean task to get even one of them exonerated. And I'm here to tell you, what it's taken to get Kevin, a clearly innocent person, exonerated has been extraordinary. But when you then add, 20 plus other men who are tonight literally sitting in prison with these convictions, who don't have the resources for, the attorney power it's going to take, who don't have necessarily the fortitude and the attitude and the dignity that Kevin has, who did become furious and angry, and therefore may have engendered other disciplinary problems while incarcerated, even though they're innocent men. All of these things weigh heavily against their exoneration. And yet this is a team of detectives that's gotten away with it for 25 years.
Yeah, this is the John Burge syndrome, all continued all over again with just new names, different names, I should say. So this goes before the appeals court, right? This goes before the appeals court. Did you argue this before the appeals court, Elizabeth? Did you?
My co-counsel, and I should have said that my co-counsel, Brandon Clark, has been instrumental in this process, and very much wished he could be with us tonight. Just because of the holidays and family obligations, he wasn't able to. So Brandon and I have tag teamed this case for the last 9 years, but he actually handled the argument before the most recent argument before the appellate court.
Yeah. Okay. So this went before the appellate court. So tell us what happened at the appeals court. It went through the trial, and that was a sham, and you ended up, living this nightmare for 23 years, and this goes before the appeals court. What happened at the appeals court, and what was determined there?
Well, Kevin, do you want to speak to the earlier appeals, or would you like me to handle the later?
What you mean?
Originally he was convicted, and he went through the normal course of appeals he was convicted when represented by a public defender. They took the requisite appeals. There was actually a motion for a new trial because there was very strong evidence as to the actual shooter in the situation. That was denied. He followed the normal course of appeals. Those were denied. Kevin pursued some relief just on his own, doing what he could do from prison, which was, of course, very limited. Then my co-counsel, Brandon Clark, got involved through kind of a fluke, through as a law student, actually. And once he became a licensed lawyer, started pursuing what we call post-conviction relief on Kevin's behalf. But again, that system is very much geared towards sustaining these convictions. It's geared towards the finality of convictions. So you have to have beyond extraordinary evidence to overturn a conviction in that system. We took the post-conviction proceedings up through the Illinois Supreme Court, and we were denied relief at each level. But importantly, both the first level appellate court and the Supreme Court certain justices indicated that they had very profound concerns about the integrity of this conviction. And so complicated procedural history that doesn't really matter here, but Justice Mary Mikva at the first appellate court level ended up writing that Kevin's case had all the hallmarks of the wrong person being convicted. We thought that should be enough, but it wasn't. And the majority in that case affirmed his conviction, or continued to deny him post-conviction relief. It went up to the Illinois Supreme Court. Justice Neville wrote a concurring opinion imploring the state's attorney to look into this case and other cases involving these detectives, expressed his deep concern of, the outcry of police misconduct and witness coercion coming out of the Chicago Police Department proceedings like Kevin's. But again, nothing was done. And it wasn't until we discovered a profound conflict of interest in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, namely that one of those state's attorneys was married to Brian Forberg, who was the lead detective who we allege framed Kevin and fabricated this evidence, that we actually were able, outside the judicial process, to get the state's attorney's office to reinvestigate Kevin's case. And at that point, two professors from Northwestern were appointed at our behest to do the reinvestigation. They conducted a 13-month I mean, absolutely exhaustive reinvestigation, interviewing every witness known to be even tangentially involved in the situation. And that reinvestigation uncovered no evidence linking Kevin to the crime. And in fact, uncovered new exculpatory evidence. Another witness who was actually the intended victim of this shooting, who again said, I saw the shooter. I know who the shooter was. The shooter was not Kevin Jackson. That evidence was not conveyed to us as is required to be done under very well settled United States Supreme Court law. That was not given to us. And they issued the 77-page report, which also the Cook County State's Attorney tried to withhold from us for a matter of almost more than 14 months. But we knew what it said because, I mean, we didn't know, we didn't see it, hadn't seen it, but we were quite certain what it said. And so we filed a motion to vacate his conviction. And the Cook County State's Attorney's Office said, well, okay, we won't oppose you, but we won't join in that motion to vacate the conviction. That then was held up in the Cook County criminal courts for the better part of, I guess at that point, 7 months. And when the trial court finally ruled on that, she denied it in a 3-hour written ruling that she read from the bench. And it was so outrageous. Her ruling was so outrageous. It was so clearly an abuse of discretion based on this well-documented report out of the Cook County State's Attorney's Office themselves that we filed an immediate appeal. That afternoon, we appealed this. And thankfully, the case on appeal was assigned back to Justice Mikva, who had heard the case the first time it came through the appellate court and had very, serious concerns about the integrity of the conviction. She put it on an accelerated docket. We briefed it in land speed record time. We argued it on an accelerated basis on October 1st. Oral argument was held. The morning of October 2nd, the Illinois Appellate Court issued an order. It still takes my breath away. Issued an order ordering his immediate release from custody. So one day after oral argument, they ordered his immediate release from custody, having not even ruled on the case yet. It was so unprecedented, Mark, that there wasn't even any procedure to follow to get Kevin released. And Brandon and I, as I think we've mentioned, or told you at least, we are not criminal defense lawyers. We're commercial trial business lawyers. So we were scrambling to try to figure out how this was supposed to work. I had the absolute amazing experience of being able to call Kevin's mother. Brandon called your dad. It was an extraordinary experience for me as a lawyer, but it was so fast and so unprecedented. And he walked out of prison 5 days later, but they still hadn't ruled. And 2-3 weeks after that, they vacated his conviction.
Having asked, we've just got a few minutes left. This is, obviously takes a lot more time to talk about this. But having made that determination, and they looked at the entire body of this entire process and must have looked at that and said, in a sense, that this should never have happened.
Absolutely.
Is that what this? Looking at the trial records, the other appeals, and the so-called
everything. Mm-hmm.
Evidence that that the state had, the appeals court looked at all of this and made a determination that this is so egregious that we must take the actions first to have him released. We will issue our order, but the gravity of the appeals court saying, before you get a written order, or we have to go back and we want to, consider all the arguments, and then we will make a ruling. That didn't happen. They looked at this and said, this is a travesty of justice all the way throughout, that this should not have happened.
They looked at this.
Panel,
Yes, 3 judges on the panel, and there was some dissent about what the process should be, but all of them agreed that this trial court had abused her discretion so fundamentally in denying our motion to vacate that Kevin should not spend another moment in prison. And so to get this order saying he should be immediately released is unprecedented. And I will tell you, though, that part of, as absolutely delighted and elated at this ruling, part of me, and I know my co-counsel felt the same way, was like, we've been saying this for years. In other words, the evidence that they saw and made this determination on finally in 2024 was the same evidence. It was bolstered by a 77-page reinvestigation report, but it was the same evidence, with one additional witness saying that it wasn't Kevin who committed the crime. So there was an aspect to this that was very bittersweet, because he should have been released. I mean, he should never have been convicted, but just based on our work in the case and what we put in front of the appellate court the first time around in the Supreme Court, this could have been fixed many years earlier. And every single one of those years and all the months in those years and all the days in those months were chapters of Kevin's life that were just denied to him while this whole thing was finally playing out. And so there was a bittersweet aspect to it. And I think both Brandon and I lived that vicariously, just empathetically with Kevin in the course of representing him. But he was the one that maintained. He was the one that prevailed.
and so how did you all come together? You're business trial attorneys. Kevin is, serving time on a criminal. How did that happen? All right, look, hold on a second. Before you answer that question, we have to go off the air of Intellectual Radio, but we're going to stay on YouTube and on Facebook. All right, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the program on intellectualradio.com and iHeartRadio. We'll be back next Monday with another edition of the People Show, and with some fantastic content. And we got some great guests coming up for you next week. I want you all to have a very, very, very happy holiday. Merry Christmas to you all. Happy Hanukkah to my Jewish friends, and happy Kwanzaa to those who celebrate Kwanzaa. And remember that forgiveness, when you release somebody else, you liberate yourself. So forgive that family member that you've been trying to forgive, so that you can liberate yourself and free them. Have a very happy, Merry Christmas. Good night. All right, we're going to continue on YouTube. So help me to understand now. You are business trial attorneys. Kevin is in this nightmare of being convicted. How do you all come together?
So Kevin, as he had indicated before, and I'll let him speak to this, but just very briefly, because he won't give himself enough credit. He was going through not only serving time wrongfully convicted, but he was very sick. And he had developed a stomach infection that was profound and dangerous. He had also been injured while in prison by a cellmate and had a badly fractured hand. And at some point, Kevin decided, and I'll let him tell it from here, that he was going to file 2 federal complaints about his lack of medical care. And it's a violation of the 8th Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment, to not receive appropriate standard of care medical treatment for documented illnesses and injuries. And so he hand wrote out 2 complaints and filed those in federal court of his own volition. Kevin, you can explain it from there.
Yeah. I had a couple of legal beagles. That's what we call guys that help you with the case, help you cite.
They're called what?
Legal beagles. We call them legal beagles.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what we call
jailhouse lawyers, right?
Yeah, jailhouse lawyers, legal beagles. And I had his last I think Marcel Green, he helped me out with my 2 complaints. But he was on me because most people would like to sit back and relax and let somebody else do their complaint. But he was a good teacher, so I took that and did the complaints. And I filed them, and I filed a motion for informal papyrus, which is a pro se motion. You try to obtain pro bono counsel. And Judge Robert Dow Jr. granted my motion. And he appointed me Elizabeth. Yeah, he appointed me Elizabeth. And I remember telling Elizabeth, I think it was like 5 pages front and back. I remember telling Elizabeth about what I was locked up for, the time I spent in jail. Like, I told her a lot about me, because I didn't want her to see me just as a piece of paper. So the best way I can to describe myself was to give some type of descriptive detail of who I was, what I was incarcerated for, wrongfully convicted, and things like that. And yeah, I remember when she came to see me, Prince had died. Prince had passed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Prince had passed. And from then on out, she asked me about my case, asked me about Brandon, which was my attorney. And did you ask me to give you his number or something like that? I can't remember, but I think that's how we locked in like that. That's how we was able to lock in.
So I'm a member of the federal trial bar, and as a member of the federal trial bar, we have to agree to accept pro bono appointments now and then, here and there. And to be frank, it's often a commercial lawyer's worst nightmare to get a criminal defense appointment, or in this case, a medical civil rights appointment. For me, not because I was in any way against that type of relief, but because I had no idea what I was doing. So I was really, really worried to not only get just not 1, but 2 of these cases at the same time. And so I was kind of intimidated by that process, honestly, but I didn't feel that I had any kind of, legitimate reason to say no, and decided I was just going to tackle this. And once I met Kevin and we pursued those medical cases, in the course of that process, I came to understand why he was there, what the underlying case was, and what his exoneration story was, or should be. And at that point, although I wasn't appointed beyond the 2 medical cases, I said to him, look, I'm here in Chicago. The cases are pending here in Chicago. Your attorney is currently in Washington, D.C., which Brandon was. Let me offer my services in whatever way I'm local counsel. I can help with even just the basics of filing and things like that in the local courts. And it was from there that we developed a rapport between the 3 of us. And Brandon subsequently moved law firms and came back to Chicago. So he's now here as well. And as it turns out, in the last 6 months, I've joined Brandon's firm. So he and I are now at the same firm. And that's because of this incredible nucleus of Kevin's case and the fact that we became so committed to it. It's just not something that I could walk away from as a lawyer or as a human being.
Well, I think, obviously there's a book about this, as well as I could see this as being, something on the screen that people can share. Some of the most unlikely connections will happen in very profound ways. I want to say to both of you, I'm very grateful that to be somewhat instrumental or as a part of this process. And I want to have you all to come. We're on a 2 weeks hiatus. So on the 1st of January, I want for you to come before the committee of 10 by 10 to win so that you can share with the committee of 10 by 10 to win, and that the committee can take a vote on whether or not we support this effort. I'm pretty confident of that, but we have a process, and it's not just based on me. The committee has to make a determination. I think I have a pretty good feeling about which direction that the committee wants to go, but we have a democratic process, as I explained, that I'm just the founder of the committee, but everybody has a voice, and we have to move in that direction. But I'm anxious for them to hear your story, and for us to decide on what direction that we go. However that be, I would like, if it's okay with you all, going forward, to be able to use this platform to be able to share updates with people, so that we can keep the public informed as much as we possibly can, and also galvanize as much support as we can from the public. But I think that just as importantly as making sure, Kevin, you get justice and your restoration that you deserve. They can't restore the 24 years that they've taken. They can't restore that, but you can take that, and obviously you are taking that, and you are using it for a greater good, and I really, really honor and respect that. But I want to be a little bit a part of being able to help propel this forward, and to be able to witness you get the justice and restoration you so rightfully deserve, and that we hold our government accountable. We hold accountable, because we have to depend on our government to do what is right by us. And when our government does not do what is right, we have to hold them accountable, and they have to be held accountable, just like they ask for other people to be held accountable. They have to be held just accountable. I believe that when you are in the positions that they're in, you have a greater duty, in particular as a lawyer and as a person who is a jurist, you have a greater duty to make sure that you are seeking justice. Too many attorneys are seeking victory, and you never swear to an oath to a victory. You swear to an oath to seek justice. And that's what we are going to make sure that you get justice on both ends, that you get restored, and that those bodies are held accountable.
Man, that's what Supreme Court Justice Neville said. You ought to seek justice. He cited that in my case. You ought to seek justice, not to prosecute, but to seek justice.
And again, that's justice for Kevin, and it's justice for that family, and it's justice for the community. It's justice on so many levels. And it can't be.
Let me ask you a question. The victim in this case, how old was the victim in this case?
He was 54, I believe.
Yeah, 54.
54 years old. And I'm sure he had children.
Right. He wasn't the target. He was, unfortunately in the wrong place at the wrong time, essentially. But yeah, 54. So with all the life established that a 54-year-old man would have.
Yeah. Tragedy all the way around. But as a person of faith, I believe that through this, you're going to be able to shine a bright light, and to be able to do some great good. And we're here for you and with you, and anything that we can do. Elizabeth, Kevin, we're here for the long haul, and to be a witness and to be a support, making sure you get to where it is you're supposed to get. And by whatever means that we can, we will use and reach out to whatever resources are available to us is to help you through that process.
Man, that's a blessing, Mark. That's a blessing. And I would like to say before we close out, man, I knew once I walked in prison, Mark, that I would have to conduct myself with humility in order to be able to receive blessings from God. And through this whole process, Mark, God properly placed the individuals in my life, man. Like some divine stuff, man. Elizabeth, Brandon, the organizations, and coming on to platforms like taking in my story, and oh man, I got goosebumps just thinking about that. Like that just don't happen. So I know for a fact that I have a purpose in this life. I know for a fact that the way I was conducting myself in prison meant a lot. And that's the reason I'm here. Humility is everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and your story, unfortunately, is not the only one, as you said before. And what happens with your story is going to propel other people who are living this nightmare right now as we speak. We certainly pray that your story is going to be a liberator of so many other people who are caught up in this travesty of injustice. And we've got to fix it. It's going to take a lot of work, but this is a step in that process. And we don't necessarily know, exactly where it's going to come, how it's going to come, but we know we just have to keep marching forward. And I believe that when you march in righteousness and you march in truth, that it eventually is upheld. That old saying by William Cullen Bryant, truth crushed to the earth will rise again. And I believe that through your process, we're going to see that. We're going to see that. So I want to thank you both.
Thank you, Mark.
And I just want to give you all the final word, give you both the final word before we close out. And then we are going to sign off. Thank you very much.
Well, just very briefly, I want to applaud the work that 10 by 10 is doing. And I think it's so important. Kevin's case is endemic of so many things that are wrong right now in the city of Chicago and generally. I think it expands to society more broadly, easily. But the way to deal with this, the way to attack this is in a multi-systemic approach. And so shining the light on Kevin's specific experience, broadening that to involve the other specific men who have been framed and find themselves in the same position, broadening that out further to these policies and practices, not only of the Chicago Police Department, but to the state's attorney's office as well. But then also coalescing the political strength to say, we as a community and we as a society generally are not going to tolerate this any longer. And I have to say that to a person who hears about Kevin's experience, they are appalled. They don't believe parts of it. How could this happen? So I just applaud 10 by 10 for shining a light on this and doing the work that you all are doing in the political front to address these these issues in that landscape as well.
Brother Kevin? You get the last word, Kevin.
I just want to thank you again, Mark. I want to thank 10 by 10. I want to thank, I thank you, man, for real, Mark. And I'm just grateful. That's all I like to say. I'm just grateful for the people that are in my life. Everybody know there's a pattern in the practice of police misconduct with Brian Forberg and John Foster. Like it's there. So like you said, man, the truth will be upheld, and I believe in that. So I'm gonna continue to stay humble, prayerful, and spiritual, and walk righteously on this earth.
All right, wonderful. And we're here with you all the way. Listen, folks, I want to thank you all for tuning in to this special edition of the People Show. Thank you all for listening to Kevin's story. Thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing all this information. We have a lot of work in front of us, but we are eagerly here and looking forward to going forward. We're going to continue to bring information and updates to you all. I want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and a blessed New Year. I'll be right back here next Monday night for another edition of the People Show. I want you all to have a great holiday. Be safe and don't overeat. All right.
See you guys.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys. Thank you so much. Good night, folks. All right.
Good.